Welcome to the deep dive. This is where we really try to cut through all the noise and give you the insights you actually need on complex topics.
That's the goal. We take a whole stack of source material, articles, notes, research, and basically boil it down to what really matters.
Yeah, a shortcut to being genuinely informed, hopefully with a few, interesting bits along the way.
Absolutely. And today, we're diving into something pretty significant. Former President Trump's very public statements and expectations right before that big meeting with Vladimir Putin, specifically about a ceasefire in Ukraine.
That's right. The sources we've got give this quite unique look behind the curtain, don't they, into how diplomacy, or at least the run-up to it, works, and the political calculations involved.
It's fascinating because those public statements, they set a tone, they build expectations globally, sometimes even before the leaders shake hands.
So our mission today is to really unpack not just what he said, but maybe why it matters, right? For understanding how these huge international negotiations actually play out.
Exactly. We'll look at the strategy, the perceived stakes, the whole diplomatic picture. You should definitely leave with a much better grasp of how leaders navigate these really high-pressure situations.
Okay, let's get into it then. Our sources take us right to former President Trump heading to Anchorage, Alaska, his first face-to-face with Putin in this new administration. What was he saying his main goals were? Or maybe, what were his public demands?
Well, this is where it gets really interesting and maybe a bit unusual. Based on our sources, he told Fox News' Bret Baier quite explicitly that he won't be happy if he leaves that meeting without a ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine.
Won't be happy. That sounds understated, but very direct for diplomacy.
It is. It wasn't like, oh, we hope for progress. It was a benchmark.
Yeah.
He actually said, and this is a direct quote from our notes, I wouldn't be thrilled if I didn't get it.
Wouldn't be thrilled. Okay. That phrasing itself, it puts a very personal stamp on it, doesn't it? Like his personal satisfaction is tied to this specific outcome.
Absolutely. And you often see leaders talk about hopes, but setting such a firm public ultimatum for a first meeting on something this complex, that's noteworthy.
Did the sources give any clue why he took such a strong public line right out of the gate?
It seems it was quite deliberate. Our sources suggest it was maybe a tactic to, immediately raise the temperature, raise the stakes. He even mentioned the typical diplomatic view, saying something like, everyone says you're not going to get a ceasefire, it'll take place on the second meeting.
So he knew what people expected.
Right. And then he added, but I'm not going to be happy with that. So It really suggests he was consciously pushing back against that standard diplomatic gradualism.
Trying to force the issue, maybe? Put pressure on Putin right away.
That seems plausible. Pressure on Putin, maybe pressure on his own team, too. It's definitely a high-risk approach, but very characteristic of his, shall we say, unconventional style.
Okay, so pushing against the usual diplomatic script. And then, according to our sources, he took it even further. He basically tied the whole future of talks to this one meeting.
Yes, that's another layer. He said he might cancel talks entirely if Friday's summit does not go well.
Wow.
And even added, we're not going to have any more meetings at all, maybe ever, if it didn't pan out.
Okay, so what does that do? Saying, get me a ceasefire now, or we might never talk again. How does that change the game?
Well, it ramps up the pressure astronomically, doesn't it? It makes this first meeting seem almost like an unprecedented high-stakes gamble.
Yeah, it's not just setting the stage. It's like saying the whole play depends on Act 1.
Exactly. And our sources show this was seen in different ways. Some analysts thought, okay, this is strong leverage, a kind of take-it-or-leave-it power move to force concessions.
But others
worried it was maybe counterproductive. Setting the bar so impossibly high for a first meeting could just lead to an immediate breakdown. If you demand everything up front, you might get nothing.
Right, you risk blowing up the whole process before it even starts. It certainly changes the whole feeling around the summit. It becomes all or nothing.
It does. It fundamentally shifted the psychological environment, make or break from the get-go.
So you have this really aggressive public stance. Immediate ceasefire or talks might be off forever. But then our sources also show Trump giving a slightly different, maybe more nuanced description of his actual role in this specific meeting.
Yes, and this is where you see those layers of communication that our sources really bring out. Despite the huge public demands, he also described this initial summit as, quote, really setting the table today.
Setting the table. Okay, that sounds different, more foundational.
It is. It suggests that maybe the public demand for an immediate ceasefire was one thing, but the practical strategic goal for this meeting was something else. He clarified it wasn't about him personally hammering out a final peace deal for Ukraine right there and then.
Ah, okay. So the rhetoric was maybe aimed at creating pressure, but the underlying plan was more step by step.
That seems to be the implication. He said, quite clearly, according to our notes, it's not for me to negotiate a deal for Ukraine, but I can certainly set the table to negotiate the deal.
That's a really important distinction, isn't it? It paints him more as a facilitator, preparing the ground.
Exactly. Setting the conditions, the framework for later, more detailed talks. It reconciles the high-pressure public stance with a more, perhaps, realistic diplomatic objective for a first encounter.
So if Anchorage was about setting the table, who did he see sitting down for the main course, so to speak? Who would be at that next negotiation?
He was very specific about that, which is also quite revealing. He said, our next meeting will have President Zelensky and President Putin and probably me.
Okay, so the Ukrainian and Russian leaders directly involved, with him still there.
Precisely. It outlines this kind of trilateral vision for the actual peacemaking. Our sources really highlight this, positioning himself not as the dictator of terms, but as the essential figure bringing the two main parties together.
Which, makes sense strategically. Any lasting peace probably does need direct buy-in from Kiev and Moscow.
Absolutely. It shows an understanding that ultimately Ukraine and Russia have to be the ones to agree, even if a powerful third party like the U.S. under his leadership is needed to broker it or facilitate it.
So it's this interesting mix, isn't it? The public message is immediate results or else. But the described process is more phased. First, set the table with Putin, then bring Zelensky in for the actual deal-making, with Trump playing a key role throughout.
It really showcases that tension in high-stakes diplomacy. You need to project strength, urgency, maybe for domestic audiences or to pressure the other side.
Right.
But internally, you might be working on a more structured, maybe even incremental plan. Our sources suggest this was him trying to do both things at once.
Which is always a tricky balancing act.
Ah.
Okay, now for something completely unexpected that popped up in our sources, President Trump commenting on Hillary Clinton.
Yeah, this was quite the curveball, given their political history.
To say the least. What did she say about all this that got his attention?
Well, Hillary Clinton, drawing on her own experience as Secretary of State, publicly said something pretty remarkable. She said she would nominate Trump for the Nobel Peace Prize if he managed to negotiate a peace deal.
Wow. Okay. But there had to be a catch, right?
Oh, absolutely. A very significant catch. The nomination was conditional on him not capitulating to Russia. It wasn't just get a deal, any deal.
Not capitulating. What did that mean specifically, according to her? Because that's key.
She laid out some pretty concrete conditions reflecting, her foreign policy background. Our sources detail these. First, obviously, a ceasefire.
Okay.
Second, and this is crucial, no exchange of territory. So addressing the issue of annexed land directly.
That's a major sticking point.
Definitely. And third, she added that over some time, Putin should be withdrawing from the territory he seized.
Oh, withdrawal.
Yes, to demonstrate good faith efforts not to threaten European security. So these were pretty comprehensive and demanding conditions for what she'd consider a Nobel-worthy peace.
That's fascinating. So it wasn't just a throwaway line. It was a specific challenge almost, setting a high bar from an unexpected source.
Exactly. Our sources noted how unusual it was, this high-profile, albeit very conditional, nod from a major political rival about a potential foreign policy success. It immediately became part of the conversation around the summit.
So how did Trump react to these quite demanding conditions from someone he, rarely agrees with?
His public reaction was surprisingly positive, almost gracious, you could say.
Really?
Yeah. He was quoted saying, "That was very nice. I may have to start liking her again."
Oh, okay. That is unexpected.
It really is. Our sources kind of highlight this as a moment where maybe the allure of something like the Nobel Peace Prize can briefly bridge even deep political divides, or at least change the tone of public commentary.
It suggests that maybe an endorsement, even a conditional one, from a rival carries a certain kind of weight, doesn't it? Like independent validation.
Potentially, yes. It's certainly a reminder of the unique symbolic power of things like the Nobel Prize in international affairs.
So if we tie all these threads together for you, the listener, what are the big takeaways from digging into these statements, these expectations around such a critical meeting? What really stands out?
I think what's striking is that tension we talked about between the really bold public demands, the immediate ceasefire ultimatum, and the more nuanced background explanation of just setting the table.
Right, the different layers of communication.
Exactly. It shows how leaders might use public statements for pressure or for their base while pursuing a slightly different, maybe more pragmatic diplomatic strategy behind the scenes. It's not necessarily a contradiction, but it's complex.
And the Clinton intervention adds another layer too, right? It sort of publicly defined what a good outcome would need to look like beyond just Trump's own metrics.
Precisely. Her conditions, no land exchange, Russian withdrawal provided this external benchmark coming from across the political aisle. It framed the potential success or failure in broader terms.
So it shows how these things aren't negotiated in a vacuum. Public opinion, political rivals, historical precedents, they all kind of swirl around these high-stakes diplomatic moments.
Absolutely. The sources give us a real sense of that high-wire act, managing public perception, applying pressure, dealing with unexpected commentary, all while trying to navigate the actual complexities of the negotiation itself. It really highlights the immense pressure involved.
So, to sum up, we've unpacked Trump's really strong public push for an immediate Ukraine ceasefire. His own description of his role is more about setting the table for a future deal involving Zelensky, and that surprising conditional Nobel talk from Hillary Clinton. It gives you a real feel for the multiple layers and, frankly, the enormous stakes in top-level international diplomacy.
Indeed. This whole deep dive really illustrates how public statements, personal benchmarks, and even those unexpected political curveballs can shape both the perception and the reality of these crucial international talks. And it leaves you wondering, doesn't it? When leaders put such forceful, almost all-or-nothing demands out there publicly before a negotiation, what does that actually do to the outcome?
Does it force hands? Or does it just create impossible expectations that make failure more likely?
Exactly. Does it genuinely move the needle, or does it risk painting everyone into a corner? It's a fundamental question about the practice of modern diplomacy, and thinking about the long-term impact of these kinds of very public, very high-stakes opening moves